Hi everyone, this is Tanya with Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me as I add another piece to my Beatrix Potter study series. Again, I will be working with one of her florals. As you can see, I have already drawn this out ahead of time and I'm using a kneaded eraser to kind of knock back those lines. And I will be using my Sailor Fude de Mannen pen to ink this piece. And if you haven't seen my video where I unboxed that and talked a little bit about the pen, I will link that down below for you. So without further ado, we're going to get started on this. And one of you did ask me in a previous video if I was enjoying this pen. I am, as you can see, and I try to do some close-ups on this one, depending on how you hold the pen. If you hold it flat like that, with that 40-degree angle, you're going to be able to get a wide line, which Beatrix Potter used some weighted lines in her pieces. And if you turn it on its side, and you may see me roll it on its side some, I am able to get a thin line. You can also get a thin line if you hold it a little more upright. That will allow you to get a little bit less ink and help you get some of those thinner lines. Now, once we get this inked, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different with this piece. I've decided that with my Beatrix Potter pieces, while she used watercolor, and I have done that in one of my study pieces of hers, I also want to use some of the tools that we have today. For instance, in my last piece, and I'll link that one down below for you. Actually, I'll just link this whole series and you can take a look at the pieces I have already done if you're interested in watching those as well. But I used Graphitint, Derwent Graphitint, and on this one, I'm going to use Derwent Inktense. I would like to think if Miss Potter had these available to her, that she would possibly have used them. So I'm going to try to use some of the supplies that we have today and see how they translate into her style of art. Some things I'm having to change a little bit according to the way I do things because it's somebody else's art, so I'm having to consider using some colors I don't normally use, but I really want to try to keep it as true to her form as possible and understand how she has created her art, but yet use some of our modern tools today. So I'm going to finish inking this one, and I didn't have brown ink this time. I do have that ordered and hopefully it'll be in soon, but I went ahead and did it in the black ink, and now that it's finished, I'm going to go to step number 2. And you may have seen me, if you've watched these videos, do this in previous videos. I have used tea to kind of give me a little bit of a background color, so I'm going to speed this up. I'm not going to make you suffer through this. I did use 3 coats. I let it dry between each one of these coats, and the tea I'm using is not Earl Grey as I normally do. My husband had some loose leaf tea left over that he had just made some tea, so I took that and made some tea from that. So it was a little bit lighter, and because it wasn't Earl Grey, it was a little bit different color. And now that I have 3 coats on there, I'm using a hair dryer to dry it. I'm not going to dry it completely. I know that I'm going to be using the Inktense. I want a flat piece of paper, and I, of course, if you've watched my videos, you know I don't tape my paper, so I want to flatten this out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow it dry, not completely dry. It's still going to be fairly damp, and then I'm going to flip it over on a clean desk and put a box on top and let it sit until I come back and work on it again. And it was about 24 hours later, I came back and I got my Derwent Inktense. So I sharpened them. I have to the side of my little color swatching, so I will know what colors I need to use on this because I don't use these all the time. I like to keep that handy so that I'll know what the colors do and how they work together. So I have, you can see my microfiber cloth. I have my paint brushes. I have the size 2, which I won't use, but I always keep it there handy. And I have the size 8. These are from the Royal and Langnickel brushes. They're Zen series. Now let's take a look at the colors I've chosen. Ink black, I have fuchsia and poppy red and tangerine. And this one, I'll get it spun around in a second. That one is sun yellow, beautiful color. Apple green, and the blue I chose is sea blue. Now I always like to, and again, ink black, That's one of the colors I was talking about. I'm using colors that I don't normally use when I'm making my own art, but I'm going to need them in order to do what she has done in her art. So I'm going to start out with some fuchsia and some tangerine. First, I'm going to lay down the tangerine, and I am moving in a circular motion. This is the type of technique I would use if I were doing just straight colored pencil, but I am going super, super lightly because these are Inktense. If you've never used Derwent Inktense, that tense part, they are intense. When you put them down and you put water on top of them, they look very mild right now. They look very innocent, but they will come alive once you add that water to them. And I'm picking up that yellow because this had some yellow in it. I am going to use these colors mainly, and I will pick up another color in a minute to add to the flowers, but I will tell you about that when we get to it. But in the meantime, if you have never used Inktense pencils, there are several ways that you can apply them. You can do them as I am doing here, and you can add the colors on top of each other so that when you add the water to these, they will all blend together. You can do it in layers, which is one way I like to mix my colors. I might put all the orange down and then put water on it, let it dry, and then come back and add the fuchsia on top, and then come back and add the yellow on top of that and let it dry between layers. I have done that before. Or you can also, and I do this occasionally, have a little palette to the side that has some texture to it. And I have one that was if you've watched my videos before, you've seen me bring it out, but it's like a little miniature cutting board that I don't use in my kitchen, but the back side of it has a texture. So I can color on that and it gets some of the pigment off on there, and I put the water on top of that and it turns it into watercolor. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to link those down below too. If you've never used Inktense, you can kind of see the different techniques I'm talking about on here. But I decided for this, I would just allow things to blend on the paper, hoping that it will look more like the type of watercolor she used, albeit much brighter, and you will see that in the end. So I'm going to keep on with these colors, and some of the flowers, and I have pointed that out up at the top, but I was talking about something else. Some of the flowers have no color on them at all, and I didn't want to leave them like that. Something I've noticed about Miss Potter's work is that she would paint a piece, but she might just stop midway and not paint the whole thing. Some of these had no color. I don't know if it was because she stopped or if it were because they just didn't have a color to them. Perhaps they were white and she was using her background paper to get that color. But I did add a little bit of a tint of a color to them. I decided to add yellow on some of them. So I did stray a bit from what she had on her color, but I did want to do a little bit of finishing on this. Now, one thing that I found difficult in working on this piece is that the petals are very delicate. And it's hard to translate that onto paper when you are using pen and ink. And she did it so well. So I took a look at what she had done, and I really looked and studied, and she used what we have talked about in some other videos, those weighted lines. She also allowed there to be some spaces between her lines. She might not finish a line, which allows a little bit more of a delicate look. And when you are looking at the piece as a whole and she has not filled in an entire petal line but has allowed her color to fill that in, it kind of makes those petals look more delicate, like these flowers need to be. She was actually a master at doing botanical art, and I think many people don't realize that about her. They know her for Peter Rabbit, they know her for her wonderful little characters that she created, but they don't necessarily know her for this type of work. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Now I am picking up a couple more colors here, and I'm thinking about it because some of these colors are a purple, and I'm taking a look at, and I decided that I was going to use that black. I believe it is called ink black in the Inktense pencils. So I'm going to use the black with the fuchsia to create the purple. So that's why you can see the corner of my guide over at the side, my color guide at the side. I like to keep that there. Again, I'm not familiar working with these every day, so I'm not familiar with what the colors do. And this allowed me to see that these two together are going to create a wonderful light purple for me. So be watching for that when we add the water. So I'm going to be quiet and let you watch me work. And if I don't tell you what the colors are, I will put those up on the screen. Doing a little touch up with that yellow on here, and then I'm going to pick up a color that I have not used yet. I didn't list it in the colors initially. All of these colors I have, but this is the teal green. And I initially had decided not to use that color, but I took a look at the color chart and it was just going to work so well on those stems, but I knew I had to be very, very careful because that teal green can overtake other colors. But the other colors you saw me using on here are the ones that I've already used, the fuchsia, the yellow, all of those I've already used. I am adding in that blue, that sea blue, that's going to be used on the stems, and I'm just very lightly going over them. Some of them I'm going to layer the colors, and some I'm just going to have like an area of yellow or an area of the blue, and they might not overlap. I do come in and add that tangerine to some of the areas because it actually gives the stems, along with that green underneath, it gives it kind of a brown look, because some of these did have a few areas where it looked a little like dead in some spaces. So again, gonna be quiet, let you watch me work, and then we're gonna come back in a few minutes and add the water. One thing I did want to note, I do come back and listen to these videos and rewatch my videos to make sure I am telling you exactly what's happening on the screen. One color that I did not use was the green apple, and actually I didn't use it because that teal green worked so much better for what I needed on those stems. I just never picked up that green apple. So if you paid attention to the colors I said at the beginning, you're like, she never used that. I didn't. Sometimes I choose my palette. I like to choose it ahead of time. And there will be a color that I change my mind on midstream, and this was it. So I did look back through here and I never actually picked up that green. So there you go. That's what happened on that one. But as promised, I'm finishing up with that tangerine to kind of get some of those brown areas in, and now we are starting with the water. I do have a microfiber cloth. You are welcome to use any kind of cloth. That just happens to be what I have. I only have one container of water. Usually I have two if I'm working with watercolor, but since I'm not really mixing colors, I just need the water to activate colors, then I only need one. And I'm using that size 8 brush, and again, as I promised, notice how the fuchsia and the black are making a lovely purple color for me. So not all of these were purple. One thing I will do, you'll see that I will have an area of a lot of concentration of color, and then while my brush is still a little bit wet with that color, I might take it on somewhere else to kind of blend it out. I might need it in another area. Something else I do, because these colors are intense, you will see me color and then immediately go and wipe my brush as I did there. That's to get a little bit of the color off so that things can be muted a little bit more. If you find when you're using these colors stuff is too bright, you can always go back in, get a little more water on your brush, but always tap it. If you don't tap it, you'll have excess water and it will really make that bleed around there. And if you're wanting to lift color, just have a little bit of water on your brush and that will allow you to lift it. Now, I did have an area in here that was a little too red and I wanted it to be more maroon. So one way you can apply these colors is just touch the tip of the pencil with a wet brush and it will pick up that color, and you can come right back in and dab it. And that's what you see me doing here. Now, the first little dot that I put down, I had too much water in my brush, but all I had to do was tap it and then it worked out perfectly. So I'm going to keep that black handy because there are a few more areas I thought, well, if I missed those areas, I probably missed some others. So I'm going to keep that handy. When you are doing these colors, notice I am not going from red straight to a green. Every time you switch an area where you're going to be using you're going to have another color, always rinse your brush and go back in. That way your colors don't get muddy. That's how I can have yellow and orange over here, but yet have the maroon at the top of the petals. So you just kind of have to be careful about remembering to always rinse your brush, tap your brush. It's a constant back and forth motion, but once you do it a few times, you kind of get used to it and it just becomes second nature. By this point, you can definitely see how bright the colors are. So far in viewing Beatrix Potter's work, I have not found that her colors are quite this intense. But again, that is the type of material that I'm working with on this one. If you want to see the reference for this piece, you can find it on the Victoria and Albert Museum website, and I will link that down below. I don't really like putting her piece up here because I don't own the rights to her piece. I'm just using it as a study piece, but I do want to give credit because they are the ones that own that. So I'll put that down below and you can check that out. I am so happy that you joined me for this piece. I am always happy when you are here. I will be putting out some more of these and trying some different types of materials. If you have a suggestion for me, put that down below because I would love to hear it. And maybe I can use your suggestion in an upcoming video. So again, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one.